Hi, my name is Laurie, and I struggle with bipolar disorder type 2 and borderline personality disorder. So I wanted to talk to you about my experience with the let them theory and what happened, how I tried to practice the let them theory, and how I failed and why I think I failed. So Mel Robbin, who is a motivational speaker and author, wrote a book called The Let Them Theory. And the basics of it is, just let them. Let other people be themselves. Let other people do what they want to do. Stop trying to control everything and stop trying to change people. Because the truth of the matter is you can't change people and you can't control them anyway. And so it's about relieving yourself of that worry and anxiety and trying to make everything okay and the way that you think it should be. So it's like if you have something that you want your husband to do on Saturday and he wants to go play golf, let them. And I know in that case it's actually let him, but this is the theory. We use the let them phrase. So it's like let them. Let him go play golf. If you have a friend that's backing away, for whatever reason, maybe she's just kind of moved on and made some new friends, or maybe she's upset with you, or whatever the reason is, if she's pulling away from your friendship, just let them. Let them do that. And then Mel Robbin used the example of her son. It was prom night. There was a big group of them. They were having their pictures made, and they all wanted to go to this small taco place in town. And she started, being like, oh no, you can't do that. You need reservations. Let me make some calls. And her daughter looked at her and said, Mom, just let them. It's their prom, just let them. And so she let go of control, decided to let them just go ahead and be them and do what they wanted to do. And it made her feel better. And so she started this kind of thing on Instagram, and then she ended up writing a book. Well, if you have had a lot of experience in therapy, and if you've maybe been to a 12-step program, you're kind of familiar with that concept anyway, of realizing that you don't have control over others and you can't control everything and you just need to let go. So this is my story this weekend, and this is how hard I tried to let them and how epically I failed. Is epically a word? Epic failure. Okay. So my mom is 89 years old and she has a back that really hurts her. And so she was in even more pain than usual. So I gave her pain medicine for a couple of days. Well, that wasn't helping. So I took her to the doctor and they gave her a steroid shot and some prednisone to bring down the inflammation. Well, that didn't work. So I was like, okay, I need to get her into an orthopedic doctor and let them, see if there's not something we can do. So we went to the doctor or whatever, and I forgot her walker of all things. And this place is huge. And so she was hanging onto my hand, but she was having to walk up and down hallways. And then they took her in for x-rays without me, and she had to dress and undress and stand while she did the x-rays. And by the time she got back to the nurse practitioner's office, well, she was out of breath and she was having trouble catching her breath. Well, she has leaky heart valve. And sometimes when she overexerts herself, that happens. She gets a little out of breath. So she goes ahead and kind of starts to calm down her breathing, and we start the appointment. And we're like right at the end of the appointment. I mean, we are starting to talk about medicine, starting to talk about what we should do. And my mom all of a sudden points to her chest and says, "Ooh, I'm having chest pains." And I was like, well, when did that happen? And she said, well, it just started. And I said, well, you're probably just out of breath. Well, the nurse practitioner, of course, I know it's her job and she has to do this. But she said, those chest pains came on suddenly. I think that we need to send her to the hospital. And in my mind, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I mean, we are this close to having this appointment over. And you just do not understand how difficult it is to get an 89-year-old woman ready and out the door and to the doctor's office and walk up and down these halls, especially when her, daughter forgets her, walker. But it's like, this is a difficult process, and it's difficult for me, but it's also very difficult for her. So I said, that's fine. I get, I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. I didn't feel like she was in distress. She didn't look in distress, but they said, no, you don't fool around with chest pains. So I said, that's fine. Call 911. And then I looked at the nurse practitioner and I said, okay, while we're waiting on the ambulance, can we go ahead and finish this appointment up? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, y'all are going to make me come back. and it's like, we are almost done. Let's get this over with. Well, she looked at me and she said, well, I think we need to address this first. And I was like, crap, I knew it. And so they took her blood pressure. It was normal. They checked her heart rate. It was normal. Her chest pain started going away. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So the ambulance came, and as the ambulance left, I got her purse and everything, and I started out of the hallway. And the nurse practitioner walked over to the nurse and the receptionist, and she was like, can you believe her? Are you kidding me? Did you hear her? And, they were making fun of me and they were talking bad about me. And I was like, I wanted to turn around and say, you have no idea how hard it was to get her out here. She's been in so much pain. And I said, but I was like, just go, just go. So I go to the hospital, and while we're in the emergency room, of course, everything was fine, but they want to keep her there for 3.5 hours and do these different blood tests and stuff. So we had to stay. Well, I decided to turn on YouTube. Well, I'm subscribed to Mel Robbin's YouTube channel. And so I saw this video on the Let Them Theory, and it was actually her podcast. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to listen to this. So I'm sitting there in the room while we're waiting for doctors to do different tests and stuff. And I'm listening to the Let Them Theory. And my mom the whole time is going, oh, that's you. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, you really need to pay attention to this. You need to listen to this. And so we listen to this like hour-long podcast. And so sure enough, everything's fine. We get her dressed. We start out the door and we get to the car. And I was like, Mom, I said, I'm so upset. And I said, I literally can't stop thinking about this. I said, they were talking about me and being ugly when, I left the doctor's office. And I said, but they just don't understand. And I said, it's not that I was being mean or that I didn't care about you. I just didn't feel like you were in distress. I felt like you were okay and you just needed to get a few good deep breaths. And I said, now they're talking about me and they've made fun of me, and now we've got to go back, and they're probably not going to have the medicine that we talked about called into the pharmacy. And I started worrying, and I started getting anxious, and I started, and my mom looked at me and she said, did you learn nothing? And I went, what? She said, did you learn nothing? Just let them. Just let them. Who cares what they think? Who cares what they're saying? Just let them. Well, I started laughing and I was like, okay, I'm going to practice that this weekend. So that was on Thursday. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I started worrying about it. I started worrying about what they thought, what they said. I started feeling embarrassed and humiliated. I felt stupid. I felt like I wanted to defend myself. And I was like, now we've got to go back. And I was angry about that because we were so close to the end. Why couldn't you just finish up and get the medicine called in? And, I was obsessing. I was absolutely obsessing. Well, all weekend long, I would go, all right, Laurie, just let them. Like, this is over and there's nothing you can do about it. Let them think what they want to think. Let them say what they want to say. Just let them. And all weekend long, I practiced this, and yet I kept obsessing and worrying about it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So here's the two things that I think I have figured out. Number one is I do have bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder, which means rejection for me is really hard. And my logical brain, which was saying, there's nothing you can do about it, it's over with, just let them. My logical brain knew, like, this is the right thing. But the feeling part of my brain just couldn't get in line. I just couldn't stop feeling the embarrassment, the anger, the worry, the anxiety, the what ifs, and how's the next appointment going to go, and do I need to defend myself, and the feelings wouldn't stop. So part of that might be because of my mental illness, and it could be that if I practice that if my brain were maybe in a more balanced mood, that would work. But the second thing I learned is, like, this is really hard. It is definitely something that you will have to practice. I can see how it's going to do a lot of good if I can get it down, because if you make it into a habit, if you practice it and make it into a habit, then it will be like, okay, just let them, and it will be easier to just let it go. So that's the thing. It's definitely not something that's easy. It's something that you have to put into practice. And I think if my brain had been a little more balanced, I think I would have been a little better off, but I was already having kind of a bad bipolar week anyway. So anyway, that is my story with the let them theory. Epic fail, but I'm going to continue to try, continue to practice, because it is a good theory. Thank you for watching. Bye.